Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. How many of you have heard of the Barefoot Violinist? Well, Malcolm Watson, aka the Barefoot Violinist, is here with us today. And after the interview, I will post a link if you care to donate to the Get Malcolm Some Shoes Fund.
I love it.
Actually, I need shoes, so I think I'm going to set up my own account. But seriously, I've heard his live performances are quite something: inspirational, spiritual, cathartic, even. He dances and moves with the music, not to the music, in essence, becoming one with the music. We will talk more about this a little later. First, I want to get a little background on Malcolm and find out about his musical life before the Barefoot Violinist. I first became interested in Mr. Watson when he was in the folk psych rock duo Subway with Irv Mowry, who sadly passed away in 2015. So hopefully in this upcoming chat, we'll fill in some of the gaps in Malcolm's career and find out all about the Barefoot Violinist. Well, welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, Greg.
Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here.
Of course. Yeah.
Let's go back a few years, probably.
Absolutely, indeed.
Yes. Talk about where you were born.
I was born in. It's very, very funny, really. I was born in a great manor house. And it's not that I become from any kind of wealthy background. In fact, the exact opposite. I was born during the truce of the Second World War. So the war literally had ended a few days before I was born. And as it happened back then, to safeguard the pregnant women and their forthcoming children, they moved them out of London because of the massive bombings going on from the Germans. And so they had moved all the women to these big, big manor houses, etc., which they were using as maternity homes, to safeguard the future of the kids.
Yeah.
So I was born there. I grew up in, see, now we go to the opposite side of the coin. I grew up in the slums of London in a place called Archway, Islington. Oh. And it was gangland. People in America really, I think, have a very conservative, beautiful image of England, but I grew up in what was gangland.
Okay.
So it was, in fact, all my memories prior to the age of 5 are monochrome, which is really bizarre, you know.
Right.
It was a very black and white kind of environment.
Yeah.
Then at the age of 5, I got my first violin, and I was already wearing glasses. So you can imagine poking my nose outside the front door, it was wham! You know, right. I was. So I learned to become quite a good street fighter from a very early age.
Did you? I've heard stories of kids playing in bombed out buildings. Did you do any of that?
Those were our playgrounds.
Yeah.
Not that I had many kids, but we had bomb sites all along the street that I grew up in, and those were the playgrounds for us kids.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were really dangerous, of course.
Yeah, wow. Yeah,
you know, very, very, very dark. It was such a different age. I remember I used to go around the corner to get bread, and of course we didn't have any of the big corporations back then. So it was a little home bakery, and you go along at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the bread was hot out of the oven, hot, crispy bread, which was wonderful. And you could smell the knackers yards. And I don't know if people know what a knackers yard is.
What is that?
But it's where they use old bones from horses, and they boil them down and make glue.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
yeah, and
Yeah,
they were called knockers yards,
yeah.
So yeah, it was very dirty, very grimy. We had streetcars like they had in America, but they were all electric, which I guess they maybe were in the US as well.
I think so at that time.
But yeah, they ran on rails, and the roads were wooden tarred blocks, so they could accommodate the rail lines. And wow, memory lane indeed. That's going way back.
All right. Would you remember hearing any music in the house as a child?
Yes, yes. My mum played piano, and my uncle, her brother, played violin in one of the orchestras,
Ah, okay.
one of the big symphonies. And so he gave me my first violin when I was 5. And we used to have musical evenings. To be honest with you, I found very, very boring. I was like, of course, a little kid, and it was like, oh God, I've got to sit around while all these adults play music and sing.
Yeah.
So my mum sang, and my uncle played violin, and I'm sure there were others too. But as I look back on it, they were very special, actually, the way it was standard for people to entertain themselves. We didn't have television. We didn't even have radio.
Right, right. Yeah. I've heard about the Paul McCartney and the McCartney family, how they would all gather around, the relatives around the piano. And
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And in retrospect, when I look back on it, that was very, very, very special. Yeah. And it was expected that everybody would contribute in some way or another. They would sing, quote poetry. My dad, I'm trying to remember what it was. He used to recite these incredible poems about, oh God, there was one about this kid, and it in a broad kind of accent, about how we go to the zoo, and he would poke his horse's head handle through the bars to annoy the lions. And one day the lion went woof and took him inside, and we never saw little Willie again. So you get all these wonderful poems, and it was good. It really was.
Well, I could see there was that creative gene in your family.
Absolutely.
That was passed on. Well,
yeah.
How about the first? Can you remember the first single or album either someone got for you or that you bought?
No, not really. Really, I guess the first album I remember buying, which wasn't until I was way older. I mean, we had no money.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we really didn't. I mean, I really remember my dad budgeting every week to the penny. Mm-hmm. It was tough. We lived in a little apartment. Yeah, it really wasn't very fun. It really wasn't. My dad worked for the railways. So one of the blessings was that he got a cheap rail pass. And so every weekend we would go out to the country. Okay. And that was very special. And of course, it was all steam trains, and you'd stick your head out the window and get bits of soot in your eyes.
Yeah, that was all part of the experience, right?
Yes, yeah. But it was very lonely because I didn't have any friends. The kids in the street definitely didn't connect with me, and I didn't connect with them. My parents were, even though we were very poor, they were quite intellectual. And I say the fact that my mum was a pianist, she used to entertain the troops during the war.
Oh,
and
okay.
followed my dad around. She could have been a superstar, very definitely. But she actually chose to be an activist,
Yeah.
was fighting for the rights of the working class and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And also I've heard, back then it wasn't really promoted or encouraged the females, the mothers. They needed to take care of the children and the kids. So,
Absolutely.
the career in music wasn't really, yeah,
Oh, no,
viable
it was the very few and far between.
to do that. Well,
Yeah.
you said at 5 you got your first violin and
Yeah,
you began playing
but
performances.
not really, really, because I mean, my uncle gave me, as I say, my first violin at the age of 5, which I still have.
You do,
I
okay.
do. And
It's not readily available, is it, to show? I mean,
it is. If you forgive me going off screen for a moment, I can pull it
hey,
out. Oh my goodness, all the strings have snapped and stuff on it. I haven't taken it out of the case in years. So
well, still look at that.
that's
Wow.
my first violin. As I say,
Wow.
I got it at the age of 5, but unfortunately back then, even though I was so excited, unlike now with Suzuki violin teaching and things, and you talk to somebody and say, "Oh, I've just started my baby on violin," and they go, "How old is it? 6 months old? Aren't you leaving it a bit late?" 6 months old, Back then, it was considered that 5 was way too young, that you weren't mature enough to
Right.
be able to seriously study an instrument. So
Uh-huh.
we couldn't find a teacher for me until I was 7.
Okay. Okay.
But,
Now,
but things progressed fairly rapidly after that. Um, from the moment I got the violin, I had decided I was going to be a violinist
okay.
and that I was going to be a world-class violinist. And it wasn't a question of arrogance. It was just a question of I just knew I was going to be really, really good.
Yeah.
And literally within a year of starting to play the violin, I was winning awards and performing in concerts in public by the age of 8 and a half. And whenever I'd go in for a contest, I mean, my dad considered I was arrogant, but I'd say, "No, Dad, I wasn't arrogant. I was certain."
Yeah. You were just confident.
Yeah, and I just knew that every contest I would go in, I would walk away with the medal, that I would be the first.
Yeah.
It was just nobody else seemed to be that good.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I didn't consider in one respect that I was that good, but I knew I was a jolly sight better than the other kids.
Well, how about your nerves on, performing in front of people for the first time?
Do you know, I had no problem with nerves at all.
Is
It
that right?
didn't concern me. And again, I think it was because I knew I was competent. I knew I could perform.
Mhm.
Though, interestingly enough, we'll get more deeply into that. Once I left the Royal Academy and I started really being a professional,
Mhm.
I actually, for a while, got into the most incredible state of nerves. I used to die on stage for the first 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Sweat and my fingers would be sliding off the fingerboard. But as I say, we'll get more into that as we progress down this road of memory lane.
Yeah, I think something has to be said about that. If you get someone as a child before they're fully developed, they don't have time, for the nerves to
Right.
they don't think about all of that stuff like as an adult, overanalyze and all that stuff. It's the same thing with teaching. If you different languages, little kids can learn 3 or 4
Right.
different languages at a young age, but it's very difficult once you're an adult to do that. So yeah, it's
Indeed.
some
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, you were mentioning, and getting some awards and performing. Um, Switching gears a little bit, were you into getting into any kind of popular music? Let's say as a
Not
teenager?
at all.
Not at all. Okay.
Not at all. I mean, it was a purely, everything was classical.
Okay.
And as I learned, as I grew older, and I fell in love with jazz, my family really considered if it wasn't classical music, then it wasn't music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very black and white, which was very hard. I mean, as I say, in my teens, I fell in love with jazz. I wasn't allowed to play it in the house. The only way for me to listen to it was on headphones. So they didn't know what I was listening to, and I wasn't infiltrating the environment with this disgusting noise.
Right. You didn't have to
Which is a
go,
shame.
go off in the attic or someplace to
Yeah.
isolate it to listen to it. Yeah. Well, what about prior to Subway? Were there any bands that you were in or any units?
No, there wasn't. It was like it was a shame. I mean, sort of skipping through it very, very quickly. At the age of 11, I won a scholarship to a music school. So I studied at that music school until I was 15. Then I won a full scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music.
Yeah,
I was obviously a very, very talented young violinist, without wishing to toot my own trumpet. But then I went to the Royal Academy, and that was really tough because I was too young.
Yeah.
To go to a major institution like that. I started the Royal Academy when I was 16.
Okay.
And I was a very isolated, interiorized, depressed youth. But obviously I'm not now, I can laugh at it, but I really was. You're living day by day on the edge of suicidal kind of crap. I mean, it's like, and it was, and I longed to play jazz, but there were no mentors. I mean, we had Stefan Grappelli, who I didn't really consider a jazz violinist. I considered him more of a gypsy violinist, which I mean, brilliant, absolutely incredible performer. But as I say, I considered him a gypsy violinist rather than a jazz violinist. And it took a while before we saw people like Jean-Luc Ponty, who was, from my perspective, the first jazz violinist who I really got to know, or to appreciate.
Yeah.
So, what was your last question? I'm kind of deep speed going all over the place.
No, that's good that you're getting us up to date on that. As far as what other inspirations, what other kind of violinists did you follow?
I thought David Oistrakh, who was the Russian violinist of the day, was utterly incredible. I mean, he blew my socks off. He was just incredible. So he was quite a strong influence on me and my playing. As I say, the Royal Academy, it was good for me technically, but it was not a happy time. Okay. They put me as concertmaster of one of the orchestras when I first arrived there at the age of 16. And it was terrible, because everybody else in the orchestra was in their 20s and more experienced and knew what was going on. And concertmaster is a really scary place because after the conductor, you have the conductor, and then the concertmaster is number two.
Yeah,
in charge of the orchestra.
Yeah.
And everybody has to follow your bowing and you're doing up and down. Everybody's supposed to copy you immaculate. So if I made a wee mistake, which as a 16-year-old I was bound to do, there would be the deadly dagger vibes from everybody sitting behind you. It was terrifying.
Did you get a sense of that there was from the other players that they were like, who is this young upstart?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was very, very, I'm sad to say it was incredibly competitive.
Okay.
Incredibly competitive to the point that, I mean, would you believe, I will never forget, I mean, and it's the Royal Academy, you know, so the principal was Sir somebody or other, you know, part of the British nobility.
Yeah.
And we had this lecture on our first day, and we were told, really stay in communication. We have a very high rate of suicides here. And it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, kids were so freaked out. And, you know, I remember this wonderful girl who was a brilliant cellist. And we passed our annual exam, we did our annual exams, and she offed herself. And a day later, the reports came out, and she passed with like incredible high marks, but such was the stress.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
similar.
a very interesting place. I mean, of course, it was an incredible experience, you know.
Did you want to mention anything leading up to Subway?
Let's see. So let's see. I so many amazing things happened that I
Okay.
kind of lose track a little bit sometimes. Yes, I do. I left the Royal Academy and I was seriously looking at wanting to get into some orchestras, but again, I was not too on top of my life. I met a girl and fell desperately, utterly in love. And being a very introverted young man, I'm sad to say, and though I still love that girl, she finally kicked me out, and so of course I was utterly destroyed. And I went off and lived in Cornwall. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Cornwall is right on the very southwest tip of England.
Okay.
If you look at England as a triangle, it's right down that bottom little corner.
Okay.
So it's banks onto the Atlantic as well as onto the Channel, the English Channel.
Okay.
And there, very romantically, I worked on a farm and picked flowers, and then got a job as a boatman for a diver. So we'd spend every day on the ocean while he dived for crayfish and urchins, and I would be up on the surface bobbing around in this tiny little wooden boat in the most horrendous weather sometimes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I thought it was all very exciting. I didn't realize until much later how dangerous the life actually was. But it was kind of an interesting time, and it allowed me to get over my big emotional trauma. And I lived in a little Romany gypsy caravan, you know, the kind of caravans that have enormous, you know, 4 or 5 foot high wheels, wooden wheels with flowers painted on the spokes. This was parked in a little forest by a creek about half a mile from the nearest road, which that road was only 6 foot wide, and that led down to the coast, a little port called Lamorna.
Okay.
Quite a famous area. It's where a number of the first impressionist painters lived, because the light was like full of ultra blue light, and so you got that amazing quality of light.
Oh.
So I went through all of that, and then I came back to London, and I met Irv.
Okay.
And he played a couple of tunes. He played 12-string and guitar and sang, and I loved his music just immediately. And I pulled out my violin, and within minutes, we'd put 3 songs together.
Wow. Okay.
And we were so excited. And Irv said, "Let's go down into the subways and just try this out."
Uh-huh.
You see, so we packed up our instruments and went off down into the subway, into the tube, as we call it in England.
Uh-huh.
We went and found a corridor and got our instruments out and started to play our 3 songs, you know. And while we were playing this chap came along and was absolutely mesmerized. And he says to us, look, I'd run a radio show. Would you 3 guys consider coming along on my radio show? And of course, we were excited out of our socks, you know. So we went along, played our 3 pieces, and I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was BBC Radio. And he said to us, I want to do an hour-long show with you guys. And we looked at him and said, well, we've only got 3 songs. So he said, well, can you go off and get a whole repertoire together and come back? And he says, we'll put you and we'll do a full program on you. And so we were very excited about it. It seemed like everything was coming together very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And as a child, my parents used to take me up to Yorkshire.
Okay.
It's like in the middle of England, north of England. And it's very rugged country, you know, great rolling moors and waterfalls, gushing rivers. Very, very beautiful and very wild. And I knew a little cottage up there that we could rent for almost nothing, a little stone cottage in this village called Keld, with probably about 15 people composed the whole village. I mean, and so Irv and I packed up our gear and we went up to Yorkshire, and we just worked hard we'd like work for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then go for a bit of a hike, come back, and literally in 7 days, we had an hour and a half repertoire.
7 days, wow.
In 7 days. It was just like that, clickety, clickety, click. It was, I mean, he composed all the material, so I was coming in and like changing it and modifying and putting a violin part. And then the story kind of gets rather sad because we get back to London and immigration is waiting for Irv, who was American.
Yes, right. Yeah.
He was a California boy. And they kicked him out of the country.
So he didn't have a visa, or
he outstayed his visa.
Oh, he outstayed. Okay.
Already by well over a year.
Okay.
They just kicked him out.
Wow.
And so then Irv spent the next few weeks desperately trying to get back into the country. He tried coming in via Ireland. He tried coming in from across the channel, from Belgium and Germany. And every time they just go, it's you again, and send him back, you know.
Stop him.
So this went on for a little while. And then he decided to settle in France. So he settled in France and was playing in the subways there. Of course, now we changed from the tube to the metro.
Yes, the French metro.
The French metro. So I was playing in the metro and he called me up and he said, it's awesome over here. So I decided to go and join him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And me and my girlfriend at the time. And so I went over and joined him, and we started playing together in the subways. We were earning good money. It was illegal, so we would get harassed by the police fairly frequently, especially on Saturday nights. We'd get arrested and taken off to the opera, the big police station, where it was funny, we'd hang out with all the hookers who'd also been arrested. And we made good friends with them as well. So this was very French Moulin Rouge kind of stuff, you know. I'm trying to think of the wonderful painter that painted all of that stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was a good time.
Yeah,
Even getting arrested just kind of added a bit of spice and excitement to it all.
there you go.
But it actually got to the point where Irv and I, it was, I mean, literally, I mean, we play at one of the big stations. They have these areas where tunnels come in, where you've got interchanges, you know, from one line to the other. And Montparnasse was one of these. So we used to play in the big hall in Montparnasse. And I mean, I know it sounds exaggerated, but we get hundreds and hundreds of people stopping to listen to our performance. I mean, it seemed like 1,000 people sometimes, and the tunnels would be all blocked. And then the police would become very angry with us, you know, because we were totally disrupting the traffic flows, you know, of people getting to where they needed to get to. But it was amazing. We used to get tremendous, tremendous audiences. So at that time, because
they were paying. Did you have like a, I don't know,
a bottler?
Yeah, there you go, for them to throw money in. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I did. That was my girlfriend.
Okay.
Leslie.
Right.
Do you know where the word bottler comes from?
No, I don't.
And I mean, it's very, very interesting. A bottler, B-O-T-T-L-E-R, or it might be one T. A bottler was somebody that would go around for itinerant traveling musicians and troubadours, and he would collect money from the audience. And so that he didn't cheat and pocket some of the money, they would capture a blue bottle, which is a big green-bodied fly, and he would have to hold that in his hand while he was collecting the money with his hat. And when he handed that hat over full of money, he had to open his hand and show that he still had that blue bottle, and it would fly off. So he became known as the bottler.
Bottler, from the blue bottle. Okay.
From the blue bottle fly.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yes, that is. I like to hear the origins of words like that. That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Now I know. Did the band Bachdenkel?
Bachdenkel, yes. Bachdenkel. Where that name came from, I have no idea. And again, they just became good friends. We opened it. They were a rock band.
Okay, yeah.
Really good rock band. And we opened them for them a few times. I would sit in with them occasionally. But we were very, very much just Irv and I. And we weren't actually called Subway or anything like that. In fact, it was Irv Mowry Jr. and Watson.
Oh.
Well, Mowry, just Mowry Jr. and Watson.
Okay.
And we had our stellar moments. Well, actually, is what we need to do is jump to the point where somebody hears us in the subway, and they go, "My God, you guys are amazing. Let me take you to CBS."
Okay.
So he takes us to CBS, and we meet the president of CBS for Europe. And we play him a couple of songs in his office. We just invited in, and we play and he goes, "Oh my goodness." He says, "Will you go into the studios this afternoon and lay down some tracks?" So we said, "Sure." So we go into the studio and we lay down a few tracks, and we go back to see the president the next morning, and he goes, "4-year recording contract, guys, you interested?" And we went, "Damn, wow, this is it. You know, we've made it, you know." Little did I know. But you know, it was like, oh my goodness, we've got a recording contract with CBS. And
What do you
sad
what do you remember from the recording sessions? What do you remember?
is what I remember again is and I hate putting the bad crap out, but immediately the music and the director of CBS had said to us at the time, "This is going to be Crosby, Stills and Nash all over again."
Okay.
He said, "Anything you guys want, if you don't like the way it's going, we start again. Anything you want." We get into the studios and the music director we have suddenly says, "Oh, well, God, who was the big time singer at that point? Always forget his name." But anyway, he said, "We really need to make you sound like the current pop star of the time." And we went, "Why? You know, we've got our own style, our own music." And they really tried to change our music. I mean, there were points where Irv's playing this wonderful 12-string guitar, and they're going, "Well, we need to turn the guitar down so we can put a drum solo in there." And we're going, "What?"
Right.
And at the time, they had the Mellotron was the earliest like synth, and he said, "Well, we need to have some Mellotron in there." And it was like, forgive my language, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but shit. You know,
They try to change the sound and everything too much.
Yes, and this is a very common story actually for many musicians when they get inveigled by big corporate recording companies.
Right.
And then the day our album was to come out, our first album, Dylan had just released an album the same day.
Okay.
And they said, "Well, we're taking your promotional budget and putting it on Dylan's release." And he was like, "Why?" And their response was, "Well, we know he's going to be a big success. You guys knew this." And it was like, yeah, that's why we really need the promotional budget. Dylan's going to be, an awesome success anyway.
Right.
I mean, he's super famous.
He didn't need that promotion.
Yeah.
Right.
But corporate, that was the way they played the game.
Yeah.
And
that's unfortunate. Yeah.
It is. And the contract was, we made pennies on an each album sale. It was. So I'm sad to say that after like a year and a half of dicking around with CBS, I walked in and said, "I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. You can sue me if you like, but I've got no money because you've taken it all."
Taken it, exactly. Right. Well, I must say the album cover is striking.
Isn't it?
Yes, it really is. It really is. In fact, when I first saw that, or we even listened to the music, I thought it was a French band. I really, yeah. And it's just the colors just pop out, and you guys look like medieval minstrels,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very, very vibrant. I mean, it's definitely striking.
It is indeed. And you're referring to this, of course.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Yeah. And it's it is evocative of the music. I think it's it comes across, and the imagery there kind of, and the music go hand in hand. I like Irv's voice. You mentioned
Isn't
it
it
earlier.
good?
Yeah.
And his lyrics are superb.
Right. They are.
His lyrics really powerful. And we should have made it really, really big. I mean, we did things like we opened for Supertramp.
Yeah.
And the manager of Supertramp approached us after one of our concerts, and he said to us, "I want to talk to you guys about managing you, being your manager." And we again were, of course, really, really excited. And we went to London, and so I don't remember his name now, but we went to London, and we talked. And when it got to the legalities, he in the end said, there's nothing left. CBS own you totally. They own all of your publishing through April Music. He says, there's nothing of you left. He said, I would love to manage you, which of course, again, would have changed our lives. I mean, he made Supertramp into a global success. And again, that was one of these unfortunate, well, so we slid off into the darkness again, you know.
Yeah, I know it is sad that throughout history, those kind of, you know, you hear about a major label, you know, and they has a choice between, like in your case, two artists or whatever, and then they put everything into one. It's sad they couldn't have kind of split it up, you know, or
Yes.
devoted enough, you know, attention and promotion to
Yes.
everybody. But yeah,
I was really amazed when I found out, not that long ago, actually, that those early albums of Irvine I had in Europe become recognized as major. In fact, I was laughed at the term acid rock, or acid rock folk. It was like, really?
yeah, I didn't really hear that on that album. I didn't hear that. No.
Well, no, I don't hear that
Yeah.
myself either, but apparently a few of the European critics decided to put it in that genre, you know.
Uh-huh.
So then it was, I actually was so, what's the word? Disappointed by a lack of ability to make it anyway. And much though I always loved Irv and I loved our music, he had his own problems. And I remember times, like there was a time where we were performing in France again at this big rock festival. I mean, at the weekend, it was like a week long. And on the weekend, there was something like 8 or 9, 10,000 kids in the audience. I mean, it was just a big deal for us. And I remember getting on stage and we were like going into the first number. And you remember earlier I was saying about being nervous. And there I'm sweating like crazy and going, feeling like I was going to die. And Irv suddenly turns around to me. He says, they're only here to listen to you. I'm leaving. I'm walking off the stage. And I'm going, Irv, pick up that fucking guitar. You know, and he spoke good French. I spoke atrocious French. And I'm turning around to the audience again with a big smile, you know, Le prochaine chanson s'appelle. And the audience start laughing, and I don't know what they're. Obviously, I've said something crazy in my poor French. And I'm turning around, play, you know. So he had his own, you know, inadequacies. And sad because great player.
Yeah.
Great songwriter, great singer. So we kind of fell apart at that time. Yeah. And I went back to England. And I'm always a bit reticent to say the next bit. I got involved with the Church of Scientology.
Oh, okay.
Frank Zappa always called it the Church of Appliantology, with the founder L. Hoover. You know, I love Zappa. Oh God, I love Zappa. So, and it was really bizarre because I started working I did some training with Scientology and actually started working as a staff member. And at that time, and again, this was insane of me. I'd only been with the organization like a week, and I'm called to the front desk. There's a phone call for you. And I answer the phone, and it's a guy called Roy Wood, who at that time was the manager of ELO, the Electric Light Orchestra.
Yeah.
And he saes, hi, Malcolm. He introduces himself. And he says, I'm going to come to the point immediately. He said, we want you to do a 6-month tour with ELO. We're co-headlining with Rod Stewart and the Faces. I think they were the Small Faces at that time. And it was like, and I'm going, you got the wrong guy. I mean, nobody knows who I am. You know, what are you talking about? He goes, no, we know who you are. He says, we've got recordings of you playing in Paris. I went, oh my God, you do know who I am. So he said, will you come down? We're recording in the EMI studios. Will you come down and talk with us tonight? Because they weren't asking to audition me. They were actually asking me to do a 6-month tour.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God.
Right.
So I go down to the studios. But being a young man, and I've gotten infatuated with the spiritual path with Scientology, and they sold me the line that to go off and do my music would be totally dilettantism, and I would be throwing away my spiritual future. Okay. So I turned them down. Oh, I mean, in retrospect, it's like,
just think what.
Oh, yeah, you insane idiot. You total insane idiot.
To be part of that early ELO, that nascent ELO, and you know, with the strings that they had, you know, in the band, you know.
Yes.
Oh God,
yes.
You know, you could have been. Oh, okay. I'm not gonna.
It would have utterly changed my life.
Yeah, I'm not gonna add fuel to the.
Utterly.
No,
but who knows? I mean, at that point, I mean, I would have become buds with Rod Stewart.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at that time, they were like smashing up every hotel they were in.
Okay.
And I'm sure using all sorts of kind of drugs. And who knows if I'd even be alive now. You know.
Right. Yeah, you never know. No.
You just don't know.
Well, do you mentioned Supertramp playing in support of them. Did you play in support of any other bands when you were still?
I used to sit in with Jean-Luc Ponty's band. Okay. He had a band called, and they used to play. The band without Jean-Luc used to regularly play at a club called Gibus, I think it was called, in Paris. And so I'd go and hang out there, and I'd sometimes play with the band, which was pretty amazing because I mean, I very much felt like I was a faker. I'd never really understood the basics of jazz. I'd really been a classically trained dude, you know. And it took me even a long time to be able to play the kind of music that I played with Irv. In fact, like a little bit of history on that, I left the Royal Academy and I really wanted to play. I wanted to improvise. They don't teach you how to improvise, though they certainly didn't back then. So everything was from sheet music. And it wasn't until I'd had my first relationship with this wonderful, with Trisha. And then she kicked me out, as I say, I was heartbroken, went off and became a fisherman and all that shit. And so doing so, a broken heart, smoking lots of pot, I discovered pot, and playing along to old blues albums. I started, my favorite became Muddy Waters, so I put on a Muddy Waters album and play along, just jam along with that. And I got to be able to play blues. It's very simple chord structure, you know. So I learned how to, and I still to this day love blues, though there's very little blues that I've recorded. I should have done more. I think it's such a wonderful genre, the blues. So I go off into this cult of Scientology. I'm obviously no longer a part of it, but I learned a great deal from that crowd. Actually, I learned a great deal about spirituality, truly. But however, that's another story. So I come back and I had, in the meanwhile, met this film director, a man called Michael Pierce. And one day he says to me, I want to make a movie about you.
Wow.
And I went, really? You got to be, you're shitting me. That's not right. He says, no. He says, you're a very interesting guy. He says, I want to make a movie about you. So I went, wow. Now, Irv, in the meanwhile, had gone back to America. We were no longer performing, hadn't performed together for maybe 2 years. And I said, well, we should have my mate Irv in the movie as well. I said, if you're serious. And Michael said, yeah, I'm totally serious. So I called up Irv and I said, hey, mate, we're in a movie. You better get yourself together and get over to Europe. And he said, I'm not sure. I think he was still not that welcome in England. So he flew into France. And lo and behold, we get together and we start filming this movie. And I was foolish because they asked me what should we call it. It was, at that point, there were 2 channels, BBC and 1 commercial channel run by the ATV Corporation. And it was the commercial channel that was financing this documentary, essentially. It's a beautiful movie. It was shot by a cinematographer who's became very, very famous, a man called Chris Menges, who shot and directed Killing Fields.
Oh, okay. Okay, right.
Incredible cinematographer. He was in charge of all of the cinematography for The Mission with De Niro, which is again a phenomenal movie.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the cinematography where you see them climbing these great waterfalls through the South Americas, and it was fascinating working with Chris. Chris is staggering cinematographer. You know, forget about me and my music. It's a beautiful, and it was shot and edited like not like a documentary. There's none of this. So tell us, Malcolm, about your life.
Right.
It was shot like a feature movie.
Okay.
And it follows Irv and I on the road. It opens up with us playing in the subways, and then we start traveling around France. It's a beautiful movie.
What is it called? Is it still available?
It is indeed. It's called Busker, which.
Busker, okay. Okay. Yes.
That's
what you guys were doing.
I wish I'd called it Troubadour, which is a much more picturesque, romantic title. And they allowed me to actually name the movie, you know. And I wish I'd chosen that title rather than Busker. But it follows Irv and I all around Europe, all around France, mostly doing street performances, but ends up with playing with Barkdenkel in Paris at this big rock concert, you know.
Okay.
It's a beautiful, it's really well done movie. In fact, we got back to England and they went, oh my goodness, this is the most original, beautiful thing we've done in a decade and a half.
Yeah.
But like these things, these big corporations, lots of politics involved. It was screened many times actually in Europe, in England.
Well, is it available on YouTube?
It's on YouTube.
I will definitely take a look at that. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's titled Busker, directed by Michael Pierce.
Okay.
Because of course there are many buskers out there, because it essentially means a street performer.
Right.
So you just have to give it that full title. Busker, directed by Michael Pierce. Pearce, I think it is. I've also got it up on my website, actually.
Okay. All right.
But it's a bit hard. I mean, it's such a monster website I've got. It takes a bit of finding it. There is a video tag somewhere,
Well,
but
you
you can
guys,
find it on YouTube as well. You know.
guys did an accompanying acoustic album called Busker. Was that in relation to the movie?
It was indeed,
Okay.
and we did that in England. And
Uh,
you're referring to that one.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. Uh-huh. And I like that cover as well.
It's
Yeah.
gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's on the end of a little of a place called Ile de la Cité, which
Okay.
is a little island in the middle of the Seine. And so you can see, and that's actually a shot from the movie.
Okay.
That
Right.
is actually one of the frames from the movie. Now, I don't know if you have any of my vinyl at all.
No, I don't.
Well, it may be possible for me to send you a copy, as you're a vinyl collector,
Okay. Okay.
of
All right.
each of those albums. I do, even though it's years later, still have a few
Okay.
copies
All
of
right.
this on vinyl.
Or CD if you happen to have it on either way.
Okay.
Yeah, either way. That would be, yeah, I would.
I
much
mean, they're
appreciate-
up online.
Yeah.
You can download all of my music, including those two albums,
Yeah. Yeah.
from Bandcamp.
Ah, Bandcamp. Right. All right. All right.
In fact, for people listening to this, you can listen to all of my recorded tracks. I think I've got seven albums up now on Bandcamp.
Okay.
And Bandcamp is rather wonderful because they give you access to the full tracks of every track of all of the albums. And you can listen to every track like 3 or 4 times before they go, okay, it's time for you to pay some money and buy a track.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right, because some sites only let you listen to a segment of the song. Yeah.
Right,
You're
well, you can listen to all of my full tracks, which is I love that platform. I think it's a great platform.
Yes, I've heard good things about that. Yeah. So viewers, be sure and check out Malcolm on Bandcamp and his own site as well too.
Yes.
Definitely. Well, we'll talk about how did that the Busker album fare? How did it do?
Not incredibly well. I mean, you see, to be honest, I mean, I found one has to be honest, really. We weren't known by the public. We would struggle. I mean, and so it did not fare very well.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because we were a great musical sound, I do believe, to this very day. I think it was a great combination. Irv was really great, even though maybe he didn't realize. I mean, when we did that, I mean, the movie, the people that shot the movie and ATV were so impressed that they went, we want to do a series.
Wow. Okay.
We want to, and it'll be a fictional series. We'll script write it, and we'll and we'll make it a mixture of, and it's to this day, this has never been done.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we're going to turn it into a travelogue, and a cultural visit into the country, and we'll write in an adventure, get involved with gypsies in the mountains in Italy or something. And he says, we hold the whole thing together by you two guys on the road, traveling from countries. And they said, and we're going to start it in what was at that point the Soviet Union, with you playing in Red Square.
Oh, okay.
And they'd already got permission from the embassy. But they were serious about this. And they said, we're going to put up that we want to do a pilot series of 6. And if those 6 really fly, then we'll go into an open-ended series.
Uh-huh.
They said, we'll put up the money for the first 3. So what we then need is to come up with another 3 countries that will put up the money for one of the series, and they get the whole series in exchange. If that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
and French TV were interested, Dutch TV were interested. We only needed one more country. And Irv, the clown, turns round to me and goes, I wish I could use bad language sometimes. And he turns around to me and says, I'm an effing songwriter and singer. I'm not an effing actor. And I'm going, Irv, can you imagine? There'll be a signature tune with the series. I mean, this is going to put us on the map so big time.
Yes. Yes.
So big time. Does it matter if you know if people love what we're doing musically and this flies and they want to do a TV series?
Yeah.
And he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And
That
I was immature enough to
Yeah.
not realize that I could have gone out and promoted and hired somebody to work with me to make the TV series.
Uh-huh. Mhm. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But I'm sure you felt a little sense of loyalty to Irv, though. It made
Yeah,
that little-
yeah. And it didn't even occur to me. It was like he's my music partner.
Right. Right.
And if he
Right.
walks, then
Yeah.
there's nowhere to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so he did, and which was really sad to me. And I kind of put my violin away for quite a few years. And with the girl that's in the movie with me, Leslie,
Uh-huh.
we had a child, we had a boy, and to support him, because I didn't know how to support him musically, I went into this very curious stage of my life where I lied my way into the oil industry
Really?
and became very successful, which isn't that
How did you work your way into that?
a friend of mine, I mean, I desperately needed money. And I said to a friend of mine, I need a job. You know, I mean, I would still busking. I would go off to Paris and play in the subways. Because I was telling you earlier, when Irv and I used to play together, we get such massive audiences.
Yeah.
We were always being arrested by the cops. So after a while, we decided, much though we loved playing together and we got these massive audiences, that we would split up when we were busking. And I would play classical music by myself and he would play by himself, just because it didn't attract such big influence, you know, we could get away with it more easily.
Yeah.
And we had to earn a living, you know, especially as I say, CBS really was not looking after us. They promised us management and all sorts of things that never came to pass. So I had gotten used to being able to busk by myself, just playing classical music. So I continued doing that over the years. And I could do very, very, very well financially. I mean, I became known in front. I mean, I would literally at certain points of my life fly to Paris to play in the subways for like a week. And I could earn enough money to live in England for the next 6 weeks.
Wow.
So I would fly to Paris, put my case out and leap around playing Vivaldi and Telemann and Bach. It was an interesting time. But I mean, it wasn't enough really to support a family and my new baby.
Yeah.
So I said to a mate of mine, I need a job. What do you suggest? And he went, the oil industry. He says, we need to get you into the oil industry. And I went, so yeah, but I'm a violinist. You know, and he said, yeah, but you're bright. He says, if you're willing to put in a week's worth of training, he says, I'll train you on the nomenclature and what to say in the interviews. And we'll train you. Here's a book. will train you up on what's called a material takeoff engineer, which essentially means you've got to be able to read a blueprint and make a shopping list for all of the stuff that they need to buy for the oil rigs. You need to be able to read specifications. And so I went, okay. So we did that. And my third interview, I got the job.
Okay.
I mean, it was actually even easier because it actually is what I had to do was do the drawing for a cost engineer and a planning engineer. So I was drawing pie charts and things which really aren't that hard, And but this is hilarious because, so I start with this American company in their UK office in England. And after having lied my way in, and I go home and my lady says to me, "Oh, exciting, they're re-networking your movie tonight on TV." And I go, "Oh no!" Oh no! I mean, normally, of course, I'd be excited.
Yeah.
So I go into the office the next day, and I'm there for 5 minutes, and it's Watson, my office right now. So I go down, and I think it's the vice president of the company. He says, "Sit down, Watson." And I sit down, and he goes, "Well," he says, "I was watching TV last night." He says, "You're an amazing violinist." He says, "But you're not an engineer, are you?" So
you should have said yes. You should have said yes. I do both.
Well, he was very clear that I hadn't had time in my life to be that good on the violin.
Right.
And also had to have been, because I even gave myself a degree on paper. Because this was all before computers, so nobody, and I'd worked for all these international oil companies, I'd obviously totally faked this whole, It all looked very well until he saw me on television playing the violin.
Oh, man.
So we had a long talk, and it ended up with him saying, "Well, what are we going to do?" And I was very honest. I said, "Look, I'm really hungry." I says, "Will you give me a go just for a week? And if I work out, keep me on. And if I don't, show me the front door and I'll leave."
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy. I was with that company for nearly 12 years.
Wow.
I ended up their senior project engineer in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Treated like royalty, gobs of money. And when they wanted me to work in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and they wanted me to work there, be there full time, and I said no. I said, "I've got a kid in England and I need to see him." So I said, a month on, month off, and we fought over this. He went, "You only get a month on, month off if you're working offshore," and and of course I was actually an executive. But I spoke to my opposite number, who was working for Total Oil. Total Oil were our management company out of Paris. And we wangled it so I got a month on, month off.
Okay, good.
And so in that month off, they used to give me, well, they didn't actually, they gave me a business class airfare back to England. But I could go to the travel agent in Abu Dhabi and trade it in. And they used to give me an around the world airline ticket and about $700 or $800 in cash back.
Oh, okay, great.
So I had a girlfriend in New Zealand. Sad to say, my relationship with Ben's mum had broken up. It's hadn't been too successful in that area. So I was a single guy for a while and then fell in love with this girl in New Zealand. So I would race around the world to New Zealand every month to spend time with her.
Now that's
And
a
it was a good time.
yeah,
Amazing.
that's a beautiful country, New Zealand. I've
Oh,
never been there. Gorgeous, yeah. And
you've been there.
no, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Oh,
Yeah,
you need to put it on your bucket list.
yeah, yeah. I would love to go.
To this day, I think it's the most beautiful country in the world.
Yeah, it is gorgeous.
Beautiful people. They are so proud of their country, and deservedly so.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Well, take us up to, well, first of all, when did you start seeing resurgence of interest in Subway and the Busker album? Because there's been releases on other labels.
Yes, there was. Yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm terrible on being able to like throw out the year.
Yeah, but around, yeah.
I wish I was better on that. So I guess it must have been in the 80s,
Okay.
maybe sometime in the 80s.
Okay.
And I get a communication from a German record label called Gerson Records. And they're saying, we want to re-release your albums on vinyl.
Mhm.
They said there's a real interest. It's become a collector's item. And I'm going, you're kidding me. Again, it was like, wow. So they wanted to do a deal with Irv and I, re-released both albums.
Yeah.
And they, I don't know, to be honest, how well they did, but I think they did pretty well, you know, with marketing our music, our re-released music.
Mhm. Well, I bet you're getting some emails and comments on your site from fans, from older fans, and getting some newer.
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, we sort of move on to my next stage. And that's where I got comments. Like I remember playing a festival one day, and this guy walking up, really proudly saying to me, "I've got a copy of your Subway album," and how much he loved it. And
Yeah.
but I really moved into like a different genre, and I don't know if you listen to much of my music. It's the Barefoot Violinist.
Right. We'll talk about that. Talk about what was the idea, the whole idea behind the Barefoot Violin.
The idea, well, I should start at the beginning on that, really.
Mhm.
So I've moved to America, and I'm a single guy again. And I moved to America because when I used to travel all around the world when I was going to New Zealand, and I don't want to get into the necessarily the vague. I was very, very, very deeply in love with this girl in New Zealand, and she was young. The parents and the church that they were involved in essentially broke us up, and it really broke down. I mean, this was a very, very tough. So, but I'd been traveling around the world, so I was very familiar with the US. And when you travel around the world, it's actually pretty stressful, you know, doing it all in one go. So I'd stop off, and I'd made friends with some people in Santa Barbara in California. So I would stop up for a couple of days on my way and take a breather before I a bit of relief from the jet lag. And so I became a single man again, decided to hang out in Santa Barbara. Wow, let's see what happens. So, and I actually worked as a therapist, as a spiritual therapist, from what I'd learned with Scientology. So all these funky little things. 1 minute here I am, an executive in the Middle East. living a life, really quite a rich lifestyle, which I never. You've got to remember, I grew up in the slums,
Yeah.
in gangland, and now here I am, living in the Middle East, flying around the world every month. Not necessarily rich, but more money than I'd ever had in my life. I had a beautiful powerboat. We'd go water skiing on the Gulf, on the Arabian Gulf. It was, it was a pretty hip, rich lifestyle that I dropped into, But ultimately, I got tired of it.
Yeah.
So I stop off into America, and then I meet this. I'm heartbroken, but these things do heal to some degree. I met a new girl who became my partner, and we settled down in Boulder, in Colorado. And she was absolutely insistent that if we were going to get together, that we had to have a house. So I managed to scrape together a few dollars, and I managed to get a mortgage on this little house in Boulder. And then but she got pregnant, and it was like, oh my God, I got to earn money again. What am I going to do? But oh no, I jumped the gun a little. Before that, we're getting married, and we had this beautiful ceremony, and I hired this guitarist called Jeffrey Edge.
Okay.
A beautiful classical guitarist, and he also played his own stuff. And as a surprise for my bride, we got together and we played the Canon by Johann Pachelbel together. And it just worked so well. And we were like a little bit amplified. So it was interesting, I could put some reverb on.
Yeah.
So it sounded like we were in a cathedral. So we played the Canon, written in 1630 or something. Beautiful piece, and I'm sure everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And it was like, and then Jeffrey and I met up with him on the Pearl Street Mall in Boulder, where he would regularly play. And I spent a few hours with him, and suddenly we had a repertoire. It was like, oh my goodness, we need to do this. This is such an incredible sound. And again, we put out a case, and people just flood us with cash. I mean, it was like, this is a winning formula, and I'd planned that now this time it's going to be really serious. We're going to be on the international stage in 18 months.
Okay.
It turns out that Jeffrey has a little bit too much of a predilection for alcohol, which is tough. Working with an alcoholic is no fun at all.
Yeah.
And we won some amazing contests and things, but again, it's like it seems to be following me, this bad luck of connecting people who are totally brilliant musicians, but screwed up.
Yeah.
But screwed up. So Jeffrey decides to leave me. And so he goes off, and I'm going. We've already produced a couple of albums. So we had quite a legal battle, which I won actually, which he bought. Once he saw, because I thought, well, I'd better find another guitarist. And this time, unlike the scene with the movie, I was a little bit older and wiser. It was like, go out, find a musician, and hire him.
Yeah.
Not a partnership, hire him. We need one captain of this ship. Having two captains together does not work. And so I decided to be the captain of the ship, and I went out and hired a guitarist, a young man called Darren. This cute story. I put an advertisement in a heavy metal mag. Some of these heavy metal guitarists, they're really good.
Yeah.
You think something like Wendy Mouse, you hear him playing Bach. I mean, he's incredible. So I knew that a lot of these, oh, let me turn the WhatsApp.
Okay.
It's my brother calling me from Denmark. There we go away. So I put an ad in various magazines. I put one in a heavy metal magazine saying needed great guitarists who can play, not, you know, classical string guitar as well as steel string, needs to have balls,
Yeah.
which I remember it clearly, needs to have some balls. And so Darren was the lead singer and guitarist in a band called Matahari.
Ah, okay.
Sorry about that. I might need to just tell him I'm busy.
Okay. That's fine.
So, so Darren was actually on tour with this band, as I say, called Matahari, and they pulled up just outside Denver, and the road was closed because of snow, and the freeway was actually closed down.
Wow.
And he was reading this ad, and he went, "Oh, I'll give this guy a call."
Mhm.
So he gave me a call. I had this really strict audition protocol. You know, you had to send me a tape of your performance. You had to send me complete written before I'd even see the guy. I mean, it was really funny. And Darren calls up and I go, "Well, you're going to have to send me a tape and all this." And he said, "Look, mate, I'm in a tour van right now. I will be in Denver for the afternoon. If you can't audition me, then forget it."
Okay.
So I went, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, here's my address. You better turn up."
Mhm.
So he turned up, you see, and he's got this long blonde hair down to his waist. I mean, he's definitely a heavy metal boy,
Metalhead.
a metalhead, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was immediately, I mean, he'd had some classical training and we played Romance together. And I went, wow. And then we started to play this original. And I just dropped in and we created our first piece together during the audition.
During the audition. Wow.
During the audition. And I said to him, "Well, I've got a big gig in Houston in 10 days' time. Do you think that in 10 days you can get like an hour and a half, 2 hours of repertoire down?" And he said, "Yes." And he did. And because he was still on tour, so he went back and did his touring with the heavy metal boys. And he joined me 10 days later in Houston. Great guitarist. So we were together a couple of years. he had some slight problems with me. One of them being, and I hope it's okay to say it in this interview, as you can always cut it out. He said, "I was used to getting laid at least twice a day as a heavy metal dude." And he said, "You realize I've been on the road with you for 2 years and I haven't got laid once."
Oh,
That's the way it's obviously not part of our, it doesn't fit with our genre, you know.
yeah, right. It's not one of the perks. It's not one of
Right,
the perks.
it's not one of the perks. He was earning good money for the first time in his life with me. But it seems like all good things seem to have to come to an end. So it came to a point where we split up. But again, I learned how to do these things. And so I hired a new guitarist, a young man called Colin McAllister, totally amazing guitarist, highly classical trained. Now, Colin was fascinating. Colin went to university to become an astronaut engineer.
Really?
So you can see this is a guy with a pretty brilliant mind.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and he got like a year and a half into the university program. And I always remember him, because I said to him when we auditioned, well, why did you change? He said, I realized one day, he says, that I found these people really boring. He says, I love astronomy and I love the idea of becoming an astronaut. He said, but he says, I couldn't stand the idea of living the rest of my life with all these boring people. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that was his perspective.
Right.
And so he went, what shall I do? And he played the guitar a bit as a teen. And he went, I'm going to become a musician. And he applied that kind of really brilliant ability that Colin has, you know. And he changed it away from the astronaut engineering side to become a musician and a guitarist. And I mean, he's currently a senior professor at a university in Colorado Springs, where he's a professor in guitar performance.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we toured for many, many years together and produced a couple of albums. I'm not quite sure what happened, why we kind of, but I know what. I'm sorry, I lost track there for a moment.
All right.
We had no management. I would talk to management companies and they'd go, wow, you guys are amazing. This is the best thing I've heard in 2 decades. Don't know what to do with you. You don't fit into any genre.
No.
And I go, well, so does this really matter? And they go, yes, it really matters because we don't know how to promote you. And I'd sort of go, well, why? Just put us on TV, whatever, you know. It's like, because we were selling albums by the thousands and thousands. I had discovered a venue that I could book us into without booking agency support, without commercial industry support. I had discovered fine arts festivals. And it's interesting because I stress the fine arts. These are festivals where you've got really top quality painters and sculptors, jewelers. We're talking about festivals where you might get 200,000 to 300,000 people through over 2 to 3 days.
Wow. Yeah.
I wouldn't book us into a festival unless there are at least 250,000 people going through the gate.
Yeah.
And they'd either be a beautiful park, or if it was a city, they'd close down half a dozen city blocks, and you'd have all the artists with their tents. And so we were getting that really hard work, Greg, because we would go in, and I mean, we'd have to be there at like 7, 8 in the morning, setting up our performance tent and getting ready and getting the equipment set up and wired up. And so we'd start performing at like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, perform an hour on, half an hour off, hour on, half an hour off, till 6, 7 o'clock in the evening.
Mm.
And we do this for 2 or 3 days in a row. And now other musicians have said to me, this is not possible. Because we were actually performing for like 7 hours a day, in like a 12-hour day.
Yeah. 7
or 8 hours of the actual on performance. And every performance has got to be like you're on Broadway.
Yep. Spot on. Yep.
Because if you're not, you
Yep.
don't make the sales.
Yep.
And performing I learned a lot playing the streets. And if you're not impacting and really affecting your audiences, you don't get the money in the case, you don't get your CD sales. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I used to very, very strongly have statistics. So, I mean, I would count sales every set. So we could tell immediately if the quality of our performance had dropped. You know, because it's big festival, you've got a continual stream of people. And so we would typically have 300 or 400 people in our audience at any given time. And we'd sell CDs by the thousands. I mean, we were grossing like $10,000 a weekend.
Good money, good money.
I mean, this is phenomenal. We're talking in the 90s and the 2000s. You know, we're not talking now. I mean, it would be good money now.
Yeah.
Back then, this was like, also, this was big money. And it was a shame because it kind of influenced me a little bit. I'd always, my big success with at that time we were known as Watson and Company. Oh, we haven't covered the Barefoot thing, have we yet?
Right.
But just to finish the cycle on that communication, I'd gotten so impressed by the amount of sales that we could achieve and the amount of that started to drive my viewpoint.
Okay.
Not okay, because I'd actually learned way before that it's not how many CDs have you sold and how much money you've earned. It's how many people have you influenced? How many people's lives have I touched? CD sales are just a measure of how many people I've touched. It's not a measure of how much money I've made. And as soon as it became a measure of how much money I've made, it's interesting how things started to go wrong.
When your priorities are, about
You know, once I got together with Jeffrey, the alcoholic young man, I very quickly discovered that it was like incredibly healing. I mean, I've had a very up and down life, and it was cathartic. It was healing. And then I was shocked and amazed and delighted to find that it was healing people in my audiences. I would get letters like one woman said, I was at this festival in Dallas, and she said, I heard your music. And she said, like Piper, I had to follow it until I found you. She said, and I stood there. God, I get chills sharing this even now. And she said, and I cried. And I cried. And she said, you know, you've got to realize how amazing that is. She said, I'd lost my little baby 2 years before, and I'd become numb. She said, I couldn't feel any emotion at all. She said, and I saw you dancing and playing. And she said, and I just cried. And she said, all my feelings came back. She said, I don't know how to help that, to thank you. You know, she said, you changed my life. She said, you gave me my life back.
Yeah.
You know, and so my even before that, I'd seen this because I had so many thousands of communications in this kind of vein. I mean, another amazing story, and I met them. Before I met her, she'd written to me about how her daughter was 8 and had leukemia, and that she had all my albums, and they would play our music in the hospitals and at home, but in the hospitals, especially when she was getting blood transfusions and things. And it helped her get through the pain. And what a relief it was. And they would listen to my music. And then she actually called me up and she said, one day my daughter woke up. She said, Mommy, I'm going to leave you today. And can you please put on my album's Tears of Joy? And she died half an hour later, listening to my music. And the mum came to see me at a show to tell me about this. And I mean, what an experience. I mean, to feel that I had been so it's been very powerful for me, you know, to feel that I've been able to contribute that kind of support to other people. And my motto very, very soon became to help others let go of pain and suffering and reconnect with the experience of joy.
Yeah, very good.
Which is pure catharsis.
Yeah.
And this became my driving mission until I got sidelined by making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I thought, this is a lot of money.
Right.
But that really, really has been the driving goal of mine, to help others let go of pain and suffering, reconnect with the experience of joy.
Right. I think your whole life experience has led you to that point.
Yes.
You had to go through all of those ups and downs and trials and tribulations and you know all of that to get to where you were, you know, and realize that money wasn't the end all. Yeah.
Well, absolutely, without question.
Yeah. I think music is a ministry, you know, and I think that's you ultimately found that. And
Yes.
Feels, yeah, it does. It's heartening to hear that, you know.
Yeah.
That you're able
It's interesting, Greg, because I've always felt that I was more of a preacher than a musician. You know? Isn't that wild?
Right.
And even today, you know, I mean, my performance was always very electric and very passionate. Oh, because we haven't covered the barefoot thing.
Right.
I'm on one stage. I'd already learned the value of branding, of like stylizing. So when Jeffrey and I first, and Jeffrey always wore jewelry and stuff like this, and he was a very dramatic, beautiful player, very percussive. With like, I mean, he'd be playing and like hit the guitar to using it percussively. Very fine guitarist, and so it was decided pretty early on. I think it was my influence. And I said, okay, you need to be all in black tux, and I'll be in a white tux, because I've always had this understanding of dichotomies.
Yes.
So you're going to be all in a black tux, and I'll be in a white tux. So we're on stage one day, and we've been leaping around, performing for hours with my patent leather shoes on. And my blister, I got those terrible blisters. And it was like, I got to get my shoes on. But we're in performance, so I kind of slide and kick my shoes off, thinking the audience is going to laugh at me. And people delighted it. They thought it was wonderful. So here I am, elegantly dressed in my white tails, you know, and bare feet. And I'd learned to dance while I performed, which I love to do. So I would spin around on stage, very ballet-esque. I wanted to be a ballet dancer when I was a kid.
Okay.
It was I had a couple of ballet lessons when I was 7, but we were so poor, and I really wanted to seriously do it. And my parents said, "Look, we really don't have the money. You know, you can do the violin or you can do ballet." And I'd already started the violin, so I said, I'll stick to the violin. But here I was in the 90s, performing on violin, and you're always taught to stand rock still. And I suddenly went, I don't, and it was my wife, Cindy, at the time. And she said, well, you can dance. And she pushed me into dancing while I performed, and it was this tremendous release. And because suddenly I found, especially when I kicked my shoes off, because with my bare feet, I could literally dance to the end of my toes. I could launch myself into the air, you know. Right. You know, it was really wonderful. So I became initially the dancing barefoot violinist.
Okay.
Or the barefoot dancing violinist, that's right, which was a hell of a mouthful. So he got shorted just to the barefoot violinist, which I've been to this day.
Did you have any spills while you were dancing and performing? Did you ever fall down?
Um, yes, actually, the performances were actually so dramatic. I've had some very weird experiences when I've been performing. Like sometimes, and it took me a lot to get used to this. Sometimes I'd break into tears,
Yeah.
really extreme tears while I was performing.
Mhm.
And I got very embarrassed by this. And I would turn my back on the audience so they couldn't see. And one day I do this, and they're big outdoor festivals, right? So there's actually, even though we got an audience in front, we've got people behind us as well very often. And so I start to cry, you see, and I turn around, and there's flash. There's a row of photographers behind me.
Oh,
And the next day, the newspaper said, photographs of me playing and crying, you know.
right.
And it's like, oh, shoot. But I can't hide that anymore.
No.
But it was very, 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 very special because, again, it increased the catharsis that was happening for the audience as well as for me.
Right.
I mean, I've seen businessmen in pinstripe suits come up to my table crying
Uh-huh.
openly and buying my music.
Wow.
You know, that it's like, wow.
You're making a connection. You're definitely making a connection with the audience when that happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very, very big time. So, what's his name? I was playing a big outdoor festival in California, but in the real ritzy area, in Rodeo Drive, in you know, the real high end, you know, where all the film stars live, and what's his name? I can't think of Michael Jackson.
Oh, Michael Jackson.
So we're playing, and Jeffrey was still with me at that point, and so we're performing away, and there's this guy standing to the side of the audience, really close by our stage setup area, and he's wearing a white robe. He's dressed as an Arab, as an Arab.
Okay.
You see, and I go, but he's wearing cowboy boots, and he's wearing dark glasses, and no, he's actually dressed as an Arab woman because he's got a veil.
Oh, okay.
You see, and I'm going. I mean, I've lived in the Middle East. I know and after a bit, I'm seeing the cowboy boots and behind the veil is his sunglasses. You never see that with behind the veil. I go, that's not a woman, that's a guy. You see, but and then we finished the song, and Jeffrey turns over to me and says, "Hey, do you know that's Michael Jackson listening to us?" And I went, "You're shitting, you really?" I said, "I knew it was a guy dressed up as an Arab woman. I didn't know it was Michael Jackson." He said, "Yeah, you check him out." And I thought, wow, it is Michael Jackson, you know. And he had this very diplomatic kind of white gentleman with him in a business suit, looking who was, I guess, his bodyguard.
Could be.
And suddenly I see that he's been sent over to the table and they buy all of our music. And so, I mean, I don't know 100%, but to this day, I believe it was Michael Jackson standing there and bought our music.
Wow.
Yeah, so amazing, magical things. We did an incredible show in a those astronomy places. What do you call them?
Oh yeah, planetarium.
A planetarium.
Yeah.
We had one of the most leading planetariums at the university here in Boulder, in Colorado. And we initially looked at just hiring the planetarium as a room to perform at, to give concerts in.
Okay.
But we spoke with the manager of the planetarium, and he said, well, why don't you do a planetarium show? And for a very low fee, you can hire my chief technician to help you choreograph and create a show. We've got a Zeiss star machine. They could show the heavens and the movements of the heavens. They had lasers. They had projectors, so we could project 360 degrees on the dome. I mean, and we created this hour and a half long program that was spectacular, where we take you shooting. You have to be really careful, you know, with a planetarium. If you move the stars too fast, you really get the sensation that you're flying through the heavens. And if you do it too fast, you get sick. You know. So we created this amazing, I mean, we actually created history because at that point, there had not been a live performance. I mean, we actually had to play to the show, to the visual show that we created. You know, to keep everything in synchronization. And we ended up, and we had to do the light sensitivities in a planetarium. You don't realize because you get used to the very, very low light. So we had to design special, very low intensity spotlights for the stage. You know, it was a lot of fun. Great show. And we had people who saw the show once and come back, and many times. One couple who had to drive like something like 300 or 400 miles to get to Boulder. They used to come regularly. It was a great show.
Yeah. Have you played any of the IMAX theaters? That would be another.
Wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it just? No.
The seats are laid back, and oh yeah, I've seen some shows, some films there. And then back in the day, those laser light shows, which you talked about at our local planetarium, I used to go to those quite a bit. Yeah. So
yes, indeed.
Very interesting. Yeah.
As I say, we loved this. We thought it was so special because we had our live performance. So that your attention would keep going through planetarium effects back to the stage. And it was a well-built planetarium because it was like a little octagonal stage at one side of the planetarium, not in the center. So and their audience was in a big horseshoe. Wonderful planetarium.
We'll talk about what audiences you referred a little bit for, but what can audiences expect to experience when they see one of your shows?
Again, I sort of have a feeling of emotion about this.
Yeah.
All ages, all backgrounds. I remember one woman coming up during one of these big art fair presentations, coming up and she was crying. And she said, I've just bought your music. Do you see that girl at the table? That's my daughter. She's buying your music too. And at the table, there's this girl with bright green and purple and orange hair, like razor blades coming out of her ears, bits of metal all over the place, tattoos everywhere. You know, she said, you know, I haven't had any communication with my daughter for 10 years, and she's buying your music and I'm buying. So she said, suddenly we have a commonality between us, and this is so special. We haven't had this depth of communication. So that's a kind of a broad answer to your question, but people from all genres, it seemed to cut through. And again, you see, this is why I find it hard with the business managers, the booking agents who have said, well, I can't work with you regardless how good you are, because I don't know what to do with you, because you don't fit a particular genre. It's like, and in the same way, we didn't have a particular audience. You know, I mean, old people would love our music. I mean, it's unheard of, because also we're loud.
Yeah.
I mean, we did occasionally open for like heavy metal bands. We could do that because we were amplified ourselves. So it was a question of just turning the amps up.
Yeah.
We did a show in a maximum men's prison one time. Absolutely incredible. And we just cranked the amps, and I bended the notes a bit more. And we had, and most of these guys were in there for life. They were lifers, maximum security prison. And there were prisoners screaming and crying as we performed.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about powerful and emotion. That was one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had, to play a maximum men's prison.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the warden.
This has been overly used, but I have to say it. You had a captive audience there, so.
Oh, indeed we did. Indeed we did.
Anyway, sorry about that.
That's cool, Greg. That's so cool.
All right.
We had been told by the warden that under no circumstances were we allowed to have any contact with the prisoners. I mean, which I can't understand. It took us longer to get through security than our concert that we gave. I mean, they actually took our cabinets apart to check inside the big loudspeaker cabinets to see that there was no contraband.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really intense. It was funny. I was wearing a hat at the time. They kept walking me through the the electronic things like we use at the airports, and it kept on going off. And they couldn't suss one till we discovered that my hat had a steel rod running through the brim.
Okay.
Wire.
That's why. Oh.
But at the end of our performance, the prisoners mobbed us on stage, and the warden just waved the guards back.
Yeah.
Said it's okay.
Yeah.
Even they said no physical contact.
Yeah.
Said I'd never seen anything like this. I'd never seen the prisoners respond like this. And many of them stayed in contact with us some of them for quite a few years. I had letters from some of the prisoners, like saying things like, I'd forgotten what the meaning of life was to me. I rediscovered it.
And it has to be it ministers back to you too as well. It has to be very rewarding to get those kind of comments and to see that you're touching people in a very real way. Yeah.
To that way.
Yeah.
So it's like, why am I not still doing this? Well, I've never had the industry, the music industry backing. Yeah. I've done all of my own management. I've done all my own booking. And in the early 2000s, and I'm sad to kind of, in a sense, end on this perspective, but we saw the movement towards streaming.
Right.
And suddenly people weren't buying CDs anymore.
Yeah.
They just didn't happen. And I was still and doing shows with Colin, dear Colin, and instead of doing 10,000 that weekend or 5,000, I mean, to me, it wasn't very good if we did a show where we made $2,000, but you can still survive on that.
Yeah.
Paying all overhead and touring costs. If you're making $2,000 a weekend, you can scrape by. But if you're making $250, and suddenly we were doing $250 worth of CD sales, $500 worth of CD sales, because everything had gone to streaming.
Yeah.
You could listen to our music all day long on Pandora for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or Spotify. And you still can. And what do I make financially out of it? Yeah, I get streaming fees and things. Typically, I make $27 a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
$27 a month. And I had thousands of downloads happening all over the world every month.
Right. Right.
So I could no longer support having a guitarist tour with me all the time. And it was cool because Colin's academic life was opening up more and more for him. He was working successfully at various universities as a professor, which has always been a love of his. So I started touring by myself. Well, it's what happened. We're doing a big show, and Colin's playing away, and he suddenly says to me, he says, you know, we're booked to play in San Francisco or somewhere next weekend. He says, I can't do it. I've got exams at the university. And I went, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So we rented a DAT player, you know, the high quality recording machines of the days. I don't think we see DAT machines around anymore, but you know, this is the early 2000s. So we rent a DAT machine, and I stuck it between his playing, you know, straight where his guitar came out of the amplifiers, but before it mixed in with the violin. During performance.
Oh, okay.
And I said, I can perform, I will just record your tracks and I'll play to that next weekend. I hate to say this, but here we are 20 years later, and I'm still performing to those same tracks and being so successful. They put me on the Daily Show, Comedy Central.
Yeah, yeah.
With and they flew out. I said, well, but we've got to fly my guitarist in. And they said, no, you're fine just by yourself. And it's a great segment. They called it toe jamming.
Toe jamming. I like that.
With John, what's his name? I can't remember.
Stewart? John Stewart?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll have to check.
I mean, I knew they were gonna. It was going to be that they were going to tear me apart because it's what they do.
Yeah.
You know? So I knew I was going to have to ride with the punches, and it's so funny because I'd had a big write-up with Reuters. Reuters broke a story about me channeling dead artists through my feet.
Okay.
I had been performing quite a bit for Deepak Chopra, if you're familiar with Deepak.
Yes, right.
So I had started, he'd asked me to perform for him at his big workshops. And so I'd been doing that. And the Barefoot thing. And now I'm performing for this great spiritual guru, you see. So they start putting, so some nutter in the press world came up with, it wasn't my idea, came up with, well, you're doing all this spiritual stuff. Are you channeling dead artists through your feet? You know, and I went, what do I say? And I thought, well, it's just press stuff. So I went, well, yeah, sometimes, you know. So now the story goes out. And literally, I mean, it was a small press item somewhere in summer, but it appeared in these newspapers all over the globe, all over the world, about this musician channeling dead artists through his feet. So all of a sudden, I was doing talk shows in Africa, in South Africa, and Los Angeles and London. And, you know, they called me up and they put me on these talk show programs. And so then the Daily Show, you know, Comedy Central picked me up. And so that's how it led to that, you know, putting the story together. And it was hilarious. I mean, because especially at one point, the interviewer, that wasn't John, that was somebody else. He says that who they'd send out on the road. One, he's going, so Malcolm, I understand that you sometimes see beings around you when you're playing. And I said, yes, actually, it's true. I do sometimes see like spiritual things or around me, which sometimes I did. And he said to me, how do they appear to you? And I said, they really hard because they're not physical, So he said, yeah, but I said that they appear, I said, the closest I can say, they appear a little bit like glowing golden balls. So of course I really stepped in that one. So tell us about your glowing golden balls.
Yeah, you did. You fell into that one.
I really fell into that one. It was a great segment. It was a really fun.
That's funny. Well, I have to ask you, I saw one of your videos, and I'm sure it's a few years old, with you and your son Tristan playing drums. Yeah.
Yes.
Does he still play drums?
Not so much. He sort of got in this, which is a shame because he actually became more and more brilliant. Because we shot that, we were going to do a TV series, an educational series. And that was a pilot for the education. Again, I was approached by an offshoot of Discovery Channel called Summer Productions. And they approached me and said that we want to do a TV series. And if we can get the financing, we want you to be the host, me. And then we spoke about Tristan. They said that would be even better still because it's for kids.
Yeah.
So if we can have you as the host and Tristan as your kind of co-host, they said this would be perfect. So it's cool that you saw that. Yeah. So because I think it's a beautiful segment.
I think it's well done. Yeah, I do too.
It's very professional, isn't it? Yeah. So they and we did that in one day. So they were very excited about that at Summer Productions, and they did it that quickly because they were presenting to Disney and also another major channel, Fox or something like that. I know that they were very upset because Disney's response was it's too educational.
Too educational.
Yeah, and yet everybody that's seen that segment has gone, how exciting, what a beautiful, because the idea would be like a magazine with segments, each series was, we were going to do 11 series as a start, and each series would like pick a topic, like it would be a style of instrumentation, like percussion. We cover percussion that one, or strings or guitar, and we also go to a guitar maker, would be a 5-minute segment. We'd see the kind of music that instrument was used a lot in, and that would be a segment. So, and it was like had 6 or 7 segments in like a half an hour program. Very fast paced, as you could see from the. And because they were an offshoot of Discovery Channel, you saw the library footage they could access. Like 1 minute, they got a segment with the Beatles up there, and they could do all that legally.
Right. Yeah.
Because they had access. They were very, very professional.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And we kind of let it go. It was funny because I said to them, we can get sponsorship. But they said, because it's an educator, and I said, let's go to Yamaha. I said, they make every kind of instrument you can think of. And if we're covering Yamaha, I'm sure they would foot the bill. We only needed $1.5 million to take 11 half-hour series, which is really not very much. in the scheme of things. They already had a considerable number of countries lined up who were interested in buying the series just from seeing that pilot. But the manager of Summer Productions, which I was just, she said, we can't do that. We can have sponsors, but we can't put them on the show as sponsored by Yamaha, sponsored by, Philip Stein cigarettes or whoever, they said that we are happy to have sponsorship, but we cannot promote them. And I went, but that's the way business works, I said, we don't really have to say very much. We just give Yamaha a 5-minute, we're doing pianos this week. We go around to traditional piano makers, but we also pop into the Yamaha studios and show how they make pianos. Next week is on violins, okay. We go to the traditional super duper craftsman violin maker, but we also drop into the Yamaha studio and we show them. And I said, now cover it all. It's all it's going to do. They would love this. They wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. Wow.
It was like, no, we can't have any commercial aspects being shown in the series, which I never really understood,
Well, I didn't either. I don't know.
It's such common practice,
Yeah.
So it never happened.
Well, that was an ingenious idea, I think.
Yes.
It should have gone somewhere. Well,
Yeah. Again, it's like that thing with the travelogue and a couple of guys traveling around the world.
Right.
That's never been done. What a great idea! This is still never been done as an educational music series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's so entertaining. I mean, kids that watch it, and it's amazing how that they'll come up and go, God, I didn't know that mathematics and music was so intertwined, just with a little bit that we share on that, it's like, wow.
Yeah, you can get them more interested in math that way.
Yeah.
Too, right?
Exactly.
Maybe PBS, maybe public broadcasting, maybe something like that, might.
Yeah, maybe.
Pick up on that. Well, see what's going on currently and what's on the immediate horizon for.
Well, sad to say, I've actually, with my crazy old lifestyle, and I've smoked cigarettes all my life, and I have damaged my lungs.
Okay.
So I have COPD, and I can't dance on stage anymore because I lose my breath too bad.
Yeah.
And I need to really live at sea level. Because right now I'm in Colorado, which is a mile above sea level. And it's amazing that I'm actually sitting here without my oxygen on. So I breathe oxygen typically up at this level. So I've chosen, and the fact that I really not sure what to do with my music, I still adore to perform. And people don't seem to care that I'm not leaping around like a frenetic elf.
Right.
But to be honest, especially at this elevation, I can't perform because I lose my breath too easily. So I spend a lot of my winters, and we'll be going back there soon, in Thailand, where I can live on a small pension.
Yeah.
Because it's unbelievably inexpensive.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. They're beautiful people. I live in this gorgeous family hotel in an island in the south called Phuket.
Okay.
10 minutes from the beach, beautiful restaurant, beautiful people, and as I say, and I have started performing in Thailand because I can perform more easily. I'm not losing my breath, and I don't have to breathe oxygen when I'm there. So that's what I'm up to, and I'm not quite sure. I really want to see if I can heal this because I miss performing all around the place. That's obviously been my major drive in life,
Yes.
despite my going off into things like the oil industry and various odd things, or becoming a fisherman.
Yeah.
Music has definitely been my major love,
Yeah.
and communicating that to others. So I have the dream of healing my lungs, and it's actually, I'm improving it to be actually, because I breathe something more than just oxygen. I actually have a machine here in my room
Okay.
where I breathe something called grounds gas, which is fascinating, and we don't know much about it in America and Western Europe. They are using it a lot in China and Japan, and it's a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen.
Oh, okay.
And it's produced out of electrolyzing distilled water, and it breaks the water down and turns it into a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. And I breathe that all night long and on and off during the day. And it's improving the quality of my lungs. I do believe it's healing my lungs.
Okay. Okay. Great.
But my doctors here in America think I'm quite kooky. I'm glad to say that they're open-minded enough to say, look, if it's improving the quality of your life, go for it.
So it hasn't been sanctioned yet by the medical profession.
No, but I could see it being so, because
I
I'm
hope
sad
so.
to say only I'm too aware of. Because also, I mean, and this is probably something you'll have to cut out. Being a musician, I have had my fair share of involvement with drugs.
Yeah.
And I've discovered some drugs which are absolutely, totally outlawed by the pharmaceutical industry and the DEA, that are incredibly beneficial to us.
Yeah.
You know, ones that we can speak more openly about, some of the hallucinogenics, you know, like ayahuasca, which has been used traditionally for hundreds, maybe thousands of years in the rainforest of the Amazon by the shamans.
Yeah.
But, you know, is deemed an evil. You know, and it would wipe out a lot of psychiatry problems.
Right. And a lot of it boils down to what you talked about before. If they can't market it, if they can't put a dollar to it, then
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. And they certainly can't with Brown's gas, because, as I said, it's
Right.
just the breaking down distilled water
Right.
into its component parts.
Right.
I mean, the strange thing about this is, which is different to the Asian, they're not really producing Brown's gas. They're producing hydrogen and oxygen. Truly, Brown's gas is a mixture of, I don't know if your chemistry covers this, but hydrogen always appears with two atoms to a molecule. It's H2, and oxygen, again, two atoms to make a molecule, so it's O2. But a Brown's gas machine produces O1 and H1 as well, which we don't normally get in nature. And it seems to have tremendous healing qualities in the body. I mean, I'm getting an old man, I'm 78 now, and I was starting to get a lot of aches and pains, and they're going away. My breathing is improving, and my aches and pains, I'm becoming a great commercial now for Brown's gas.
Right. Well, if it's working for you, that's what counts, right?
Brilliant, isn't it? Yeah.
All right, Malcolm. Well, you have a good rest of the weekend, and we will keep in touch and be in touch, and all the best to you. All right.
Absolutely.
All
You
right.
too. Bye for the day.
All right. Bye-bye.
That's a long. Bye-bye.